The world knew him by one name, Damien Voss, a name spoken in hushed tones in boardrooms. A shadow whispered through financial markets across the globe. He owned everything: tech, energy, aerospace, media. One signature from him could sink a country's economy or make a startup worth billions overnight. He was feared, not admired, cold, private, and utterly unreachable. His mansion sat on a mountain overlooking Los Angeles, behind 2 security gates, retinal scanners, and a perimeter guarded 24 hours a day. No one came in. Damien never came out. Reporters speculated. Some said he lived like a monk. Others believed he was ill, paranoid, haunted, but none of them were close to the truth. Until one rainy afternoon, someone knocked on his door. It wasn't a scheduled delivery. It wasn't a mistake. It was a knock, firm, deliberate, and impossibly close. Security footage would later show no vehicle approaching, no one coming through the gates, just a person in a long coat standing still, soaking wet, with their head bowed, as if they had always belonged there. Inside, Damien looked up from his desk, his pen frozen mid-air. A knock? Here? He slowly stood and walked toward the entrance, a door no one had touched in years. When he opened it, the stranger lifted their head, and Damien Voss forgot how to breathe. She was no one. At least that's what Damien's background check would later suggest. No social media, no digital footprint, not even a clear photo. Just a name, Elena Marlowe, and a birth certificate from a small town in Iowa. But at that moment, standing in the doorway with her dark hair drenched and her eyes locked onto his, she didn't look like no one. She looked like a secret he had forgotten he kept. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice calm. Not pleading, not afraid, just certain. Damien didn't respond. His pulse was hammering, but he stepped aside. She walked in slowly, dripping water onto the marble floor, looking around as if the silence was familiar. He closed the door. "How did you get past security?" he asked finally, cold and sharp. Elena turned to him. "I didn't. You let me in." He didn't understand. He didn't like not understanding. "What do you want?" he demanded. She met his gaze without flinching. "To return something that's yours." From her coat pocket, she pulled a small black notebook, worn, frayed at the edges and bound by a broken strap. Damien stared at it. For a moment, nothing else existed. He knew that notebook, but it hadn't been seen in 26 years. He didn't take the notebook right away. Instead, he stepped back as if it were radioactive. "That's not possible," he said. "I burned it." Elena placed it gently on the nearest table, then began unbuttoning her coat with deliberate calm. Beneath, she wore plain clothes, not rich, not poor, but her posture was controlled, precise. "I saved it," she replied softly. "You threw it into the fire. But you were drunk. It didn't catch." Damien's mind raced, colliding with fragments he had buried long ago. Nights in a studio apartment, whiskey, rage, a flickering lighter. And her. Elena. Hearing her name from his lips seemed to shift something between them. A crack in the ice. She nodded slowly. "You remember." He did. But not clearly, not yet. She walked to the large windows that overlooked the city and stared at the clouds curling across the skyline. "You used to write in it every night, about who you wanted to become, about the company, about your father." Damien flinched. "No one knew about that," he said. "I did," Elena said without turning around. "Because I was there. Before any of this, before the world feared you." The room felt too quiet. Damien finally stepped forward and picked up the notebook. His fingers trembled. He opened it slowly, as if afraid it would dissolve in his hands. The pages were filled with his own handwriting, dreams, strategies, raw pain, and a name, hers, over and over again, in the margins. "You knew me before the Empire," he whispered. Elena turned around. "I knew you when you didn't even believe you deserved a bed." He almost laughed. Almost. Back then, they had shared cheap dinners and expensive dreams. She had believed in him when he was just a technician with a busted laptop and a fury against the world. But she'd disappeared. He never spoke about her. He never looked for her. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. Too much. "I thought you left," he said, his voice lower now. Elena walked closer. "You told me to." Silence. "I said things I didn't mean," he admitted. She looked him in the eyes. "You said the world would chew me up if I stayed with you. That love made you weak." Damien looked away. "You were wrong," she added. "It didn't make you weak, losing it did." She moved to the fireplace, lit only by the gray daylight pouring in from outside. "I came to return the notebook," she said. "But not just that." Damien was still holding it, frozen in memory. "I came," she continued, "because you're at the top now. You got everything you ever said you would." He looked at her, the old fire in his chest slowly rekindling. "And I came," she said, "to ask if it was worth the cost." He didn't answer, because deep down he wasn't sure. He had the towers, the jets, the power. He could fire 500 people with a glance and change the headlines of 3 countries with a single press release. But he hadn't let anyone in for decades. Not really. And now the one person he had once loved, truly loved, stood in front of him, unshaken, offering him something no amount of money could buy. A second chance. He finally spoke. "Why now?" Elena's answer was simple. "Because someone knocked on my door too." That answer shook him more than the visit itself. "Who?" he asked. "A girl," she said. 19. Said her mother used to talk about a man who built empires from pain. Said she had questions. About you. He felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. "Is she mine?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Elena didn't speak. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. A young woman. Fierce eyes, familiar jawline, holding a violin. Damien sank into the nearest chair. His hands trembled again, not from fear, but from recognition. Her name was scribbled on the back, Aria. "She came looking for you," Elena said. "But I didn't know if you'd earned the right to meet her." That cut deeper than anything. "I have nothing to give her," Damien said. Elena shook her head. "You had everything, and you gave it away." The rain outside had turned into snow. Los Angeles rarely saw it. But that day, it felt like a reckoning. Damien stared at the photo. Aria. The name twisted something in him, a thread he hadn't touched in decades. "Does she know who I am?" he asked. "She knows who the world thinks you are," Elena said. "But not the man who wrote those pages. Not the man who couldn't sleep without whispering to ghosts." He rubbed his eyes. His face felt older. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," Elena said. "That you were once someone who dreamed in ink. That you lost everything chasing what you thought would make you invincible. And that you once gave me a reason to believe in impossible things." Damien stood and walked toward her. "I don't know if I can face her." "She doesn't need a speech," Elena said softly. "She needs a door to knock on, one you'll open." Damien looked out the window as snow fell gently over the city. Everything he had built, all of it, suddenly felt small. He had climbed so high that no one could reach him. But in the process, he'd locked every door from the inside. "You think it's too late?" he asked. Elena walked beside him. "I think some clocks only start ticking when you stop running." They stood in silence for a long time. Then, with slow hands, she reached out and placed the notebook back in his hands. "She left a letter," Elena said. "For you, if you ever wanted it." He turned to her, startled. "Where is it?" Elena hesitated. "I said I'd only give it to you if I saw a man worth reading it." Their eyes locked. "What do you see now?" he asked. She didn't smile, she just nodded, and from her coat she pulled a thin envelope folded at the corners, held closed with a violin string. He didn't open it right away. His hands trembled too much. So he placed it on the desk, sat down, looked at it like it was made of glass. Elena stepped back, giving him space. After a moment, he picked it up and broke the seal. Inside, in neat, careful handwriting, was a voice he didn't know, but somehow recognized. "Dear Damien, I don't know what kind of man you are now, but I know what kind of man you were once, the one my mother never stopped loving. I've heard your name whispered like a storm, but I wondered if you ever wrote anything in that notebook after she left. If you didn't, maybe it's time you started again. If you ever want to meet me, I'll be at the corner of Hawthorne and 5th, Christmas Eve, playing. You'll recognize the song. No signature, just the name, Aria." That night, Damien couldn't sleep. He walked through his empty house where every wall echoed his loneliness. He stopped in front of the old grand piano, untouched for years. He ran his fingers along the keys, then sat, hesitating. Then he played. Not well, not perfectly, but from memory. A lullaby, soft, haunting. The same melody he once played for Elena in that cramped studio when their power had been out for 2 days and they had laughed under blankets. The same one he remembered humming when Elena first told him she was pregnant. He stopped playing, and silence filled the house again. Then he stood and began packing a bag. On Christmas Eve, Damien's town car pulled up to a modest street corner in downtown LA, Hawthorne and 5th. He didn't send a driver, he came alone. The streets were quiet, save for the flicker of fairy lights and the sound of a violin, drifting through the air like a thread pulling at his chest. He turned the corner, and there she was, Aria, playing beneath a dim street lamp, eyes closed, bow moving with grace and fire. People passed by without knowing who she was, or who he was, but he stood there listening until she opened her eyes and saw him. She didn't smile right away. Neither did he. The music faded. He walked toward her slowly, cautiously, like approaching a dream he wasn't sure would hold. "You came," she said. "I didn't think I would," he replied honestly. "But you did." She paused. "You don't have to explain anything," she added. "I don't need an apology." "I need to give one," he said. She studied him. "I've heard so many stories," she said. "People fear you." He nodded. "They should. But I don't," she said quietly, and that broke him. They sat on a bench nearby. No cameras. No press. Just 2 people in the quiet space between what was and what could be. He told her about the notebook, about the fire, about Elena. She listened, never interrupting. Then she told him about the nights she played music in subway stations to pay rent, about how she read his name in articles, never imagining he might walk into her life. But she hoped, not for money, not for answers, just for a face. And now, here it was. He reached into his coat and handed her something. The notebook. "I'd like to write the next page, with you." That night they walked through the city, past the lights, past the noise, past the reputation he had built like a fortress. And in that quiet, he realized something. He had never been feared because of his power. He had been feared because he had no one. No one to ground him, no one to remind him he was still human. Until now. As snow began to fall again, light as dust, Aria slipped her arm through his. And for the first time in decades, Damien Voss felt the world, not in his hands, but in his heart. In the days that followed, Damien did something no one expected. He didn't announce a foundation. He didn't write a check. He didn't issue a press release. Instead, he walked into his company's executive floor, the one where silence ruled like steel, and he listened to the interns, to the cleaning staff, to the analyst who hadn't been home for Christmas in 5 years. He didn't bark orders. He asked questions, and slowly word began to spread. The feared billionaire was changing, but not for show, for someone. Aria didn't move into his mansion. She didn't want a driver or a black card. What she wanted was time. Moments. He watched her play in small jazz clubs hidden in basements across the city. He'd sit in the back, anonymous, just a man in a coat. Sometimes Elena would join him. They never spoke of the lost years, only of what remained. And in those quiet nights where applause echoed off old brick walls, Damien Voss began to understand something he never had: that some empires aren't built with steel and money, but with second chances. One evening, Arya asked him, "Do you regret it all?" He thought for a long time. "I regret the time I traded for things that never loved me back." She nodded. "I don't need you to fix the past," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I want to be here while we rewrite the ending." Winter passed. Damien no longer avoided the mirror, no longer signed contracts without reading the impact, no longer lived in a house that echoed more than it breathed. On his desk sat a new notebook. Its first line read, "I am no longer feared, and for the first time in my life, I'm fine with that." On the 1-year anniversary of the day she knocked on his door, Damien waited by the window. It was snowing again. He didn't expect a miracle. He didn't need one. Because some knocks are loud enough to echo forever. He picked up the old notebook, the one she saved, and placed it beside the new one. Side by side, past and future, fear and peace. And in that silence, he smiled. If this story moved you, comment below. Sometimes all it takes is one knock. Share this video with someone who still believes in unexpected second chances.